we dug the holes, and he said, now let's go and collect some corn. And what he was collecting of the corn was the part where the bottom of the stem, where the roots are, and that's a very tough part that is a little spongy inside. And I asked him, why do we put these here? And he said, you see, water is going to accumulate in there. So it creates a sponge, and it is going to provide water to the tree when there'll be a drought. And I registered that. To me it made sense. And 48 years later, that has come up. I noticed at the Faith House garden, where we did some sheet mulching beds, that there was things that were thyme. I've been raised in the southern part of France, in Provence, where there's very dry climate, very Mediterranean climate, and thyme thrives there. And they like limestone, heat, and dry. And at my house in St. Pete, I tried to grow thyme, didn't work. And there, at the Faith House, we've had some thyme that has been doing great. And in permaculture, one key element is observation. And when you look at things and try to understand why things happen and try to put it together. At the same time, I was reading a book on soil. And in the soil, if you have clay does not dry well, because the particles are so small that there is very little air circulation. On the other hand, if you take some compost or some young compost that is not completely broken down, as what we were using at the Faith House, you have nutrients, but you have large particles that allow air to circulate. So here was the thyme that was doing well in rich organic material. And the reason, normally thyme does not like rich organic material. So the reason why it was doing well is because it was dry and there was a lot of air circulation. At the same time, brassica, cabbage, kale, and collard required a lot of water, because the raised beds, or not the raised beds, but the sheet mulch that are about 10 inches thick, required an awful lot of water. And in permaculture, you have to use the resources that you have as wisely as possible. So organic material, yes, does hold moisture, but at the same time, the water will evaporate very quickly. So you have to balance all this. And as we embarked with another organization on building large gardens in schools, I came up with the idea of creating a trench. And you've heard about the trench composting, where you build, you do a trench, and you put layers of organic brown and green and brown material, and you let it decompose there. And then I had read Shep Holzer permaculture book, in which he talks about Hugelculture. And is everybody familiar with Hugelculture? Or
I am.
no. Well, briefly, what it is in Austria, which is a mild, wet climate in the mountains. He builds a pile of wood, covers it with dirt, water penetrates, the logs rot, accumulate water, release nutrient, and hold the water. So the growing conditions in Florida are quite different than Austria, than the mountains in Austria. They are exactly the opposite. There they have very rich soil. Here we have poor sandy soil. They have clay soil over there. Sandy soil are very porous. They don't hold water. They have no nutrients. So you need to put compost or organic material, and they dry very quickly. So I had the idea of digging a trench, and also another thing that I need to mention is that I was interested in figuring out the hidden life of plants. Because when you think of a plant, you see what is above the ground, but what is underground is almost as big as what is above ground. And I was curious to know what was the root system, and not the root system that when you pull a plant, you yank it out and you see this. Well, you see only a fraction of it, because I learned by reading a research paper from the University of Nebraska, where they excavated root systems and they drew, the whole root system, and it is amazing to see that roots grow on average of an inch a day. So when you have a beet that is, that you planted that is 8 or 10 days old, well, the deepest root from that beet is about 8 to 10 inches deep. And the ideal growing conditions happen when you have a combination of nutrients, water, moisture, air, and temperature. So you have to have those 4 elements. So if you try to grow something in the top 8 or 10 inches of any bed in Florida, you will have temperatures that are far more than what the plants can take. And you can compensate that by putting a lot of water that is going to evaporate. So by understanding, by taking all this information together, I decided to dig a trench, put a waterproof membrane at the bottom that goes up on the sides that will store water. In one project that we did, we stored and those are estimates, so I'll give a range because the minimum is storing 3,000 gallons of water on 1,100 square feet, between 3,000 and 5,000 gallons of water. And we use for that a roofing material that comes in 4-foot length and 4-foot wide rolls and 250 feet long. So for about $100, we were able to store the equivalent of between 3,000 and 5,000 gallons of water. Now try to do that above ground.
Yeah.
One tote, 275 gallon tote is, if you can get it, for at least $125. So that is a very economical. Also, you can have 275 gallons of water sitting here, and vegetables that are starving for water there won't help them. So you have to take the water from there, and you're going to use a lot more. So to me, it makes more sense to store the water where it is going to be needed. So the idea is you form a pool at the bottom in which you put mulch. You're going to create an anaerobic environment where the mulch is not going to decompose. The water is going to penetrate, stay in between all the mulch, and is going to wick up through organic material, through the compost that you put on top of it. At the same time, in the compost, you can put some logs that over time are going to break down, absorb, turn into a sponge. So you're storing the water in the bottom, but then you're storing it above the membrane. And whatever excess water, the water that comes over the lowest point of the edge of the membrane is just going to overflow and penetrate. So you'll never have, your bed is never going to be flooded.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I missed when I came. How did you get the water in there in the first place?
Well, I'll show you. We're putting a membrane at the bottom. So at the bottom of the trench, you build a little slope,
Yeah.
and you fill it with water.
Oh, I was telling it is, but did you direct water from like a gutter, or it's just what fell in there naturally?
Oh, a hose, whatever,
direct flow.
whatever source. And after that, you just need to add a little bit of water, but not minimal. The idea is to create a reserve of water where it is slowly going to wick up and the roots are going to develop in that zone where the temperature, the nutrients, the moisture, and the air are. And that is the right, and the temperature is an absolutely critical element, because your plants will recover, during this time of year. The collards will, lose some water because of the direct sun, but they'll recover much faster if they have access to that moist area. Any questions that you may have now before we go and actually fill the trench?
Are you speaking of that specifically then in this area, this zone, because of the heat? Can it be in other zones, other temperature zones?
I think that this method is particularly adapted to our conditions here. If you were in Virginia in very clayey soil, I wouldn't do that, because or you could do it, but if you have a lot of compost. But if you have a lot of clay, then I would do something else. I would put a drain that would take the excess water into the soil, so that you don't build a pool.
You need to overflow, in other words.
Right.
Great idea. So we could come and take a tour at the Faith House would be another way to see what you're doing there.
Yeah, and actually at the Faith House we don't have this, but we're building some, but I'll take you to other gardens where we have done that.
Thank you. Super.
How do you keep an eye to make sure that it's staying in there? If it's all underground, how do you know if it's developed a leak or?
It should not, if it is not leaking when you install it, it won't leak later on. Now, 10, 20 years from now, nothing is permanent, but it should not. The membrane that is used for roofing is designed for having a 20-year shelf life in a very harsh condition right under the roof, where there is tremendous difference of temperatures. So I would believe that underground it would have a much longer shelf life. We are using here a bag of chicken feed, You can use,
For the membrane.
yeah, for the membrane. You can use a thick garbage bag. You can use, you know, whatever. Jay did a wonderful pond at the Faith House with a billboard. You know, it's a billboard. On the other side of the pond, there is an advertising. We're advertising Volkswagen to earthworms.
It's a plastic, it's got enough of a resin to hold.
Yeah. Now, some purists will say, well, I don't want to use plastic. Okay. I think that I'm of the school that I'm not opposed to compromises as long as compromises make sense. As long as the benefits outweigh and that you're not generating some irreversible problems.
Yeah, if we had clay, you could use clay as your,
you could use clay.
you know, if we had a source of
Corey-
large enough for it.
Corey Brennan mentioned that she had seen ponds that were lined with banana leaves because when they are in an aerobic, it makes sense. Now, I don't have enough banana leaves.
Yet.
So I think that you have to use whatever is available and use common sense and be practical. All right,
Yeah.
so
On to the example.
Let's do this.
Except I need some water first.
tiny. I think there was a little more water when I started it.
Or it may have just pushed the
Could be.
plastic into the voids because it looks
Yeah.
like the bathtub ring is pretty stable.
Yeah, you're right. It has not. Yeah, the ring. Yeah. Well,
It's all good.
let's hope so.
Hi, Terry.
Let's start by
How you
knowing that
doing?
it's good.
So, at the bottom, Brittany. I would like to steal some straw to put at the bottom or leaves because you want something that is not going to puncture the membrane.
Whoop. Okay, I'm breaking your
There should be no shortage of straw bales that she's got there.
Brittany,
Yeah, there you
do you have leaves or?
I think you've already got it.
Okay. I think we need to put much more than that.
Oh no, sorry, you got to move.
The straw bales are on
And-
loan. Throw the chair in there. Michelle's feet don't loan them to us and said go ahead and use them to sit on.
The main thing, I put some soft material at the bottom to prevent a puncture of the of the membrane. And
There's also a bag of leaves right there over there.
where?
The big bag, garbage bag.
Trash bags full of these.
So the membrane doesn't have to go all the way up the sides, just across the bottom is sufficient?
Yeah.
Just to make a
6
basin.
8 inches, you know. And understand that there is no
Go fast.
there is no police.
No Hugelculture, please.
Golf ball, perfect.
Aeration.
Seriously, whenever you do that.
So after that, I'm putting some logs that over time I would prefer to use older logs that would be already decomposed, but that's okay.
And Emmanuel, I took the liberty of getting some horse manure
Absolutely, yeah.
because whenever you put the logs in for your hugelculture, they will draw nitrogen from your plants if you don't add extra nitrogen. So I always like to, chicken manure is the best for this, but since since she already had plenty of road apples.
At one schoolyard garden that we used, we put 3,000 pounds of fish waste, fish bones. And this week at the Faith House, we're going to get several hundred pounds of fish bones again. And this morning, we dug some big trenches in some horse manure that comes from the Grand Prix, you know, from the Clydesdales. We got 60 cubic yards of it. And we're digging trenches into the compost pile. And we're going to put a layer of fish, compost, about a foot of compost of the manure on top that has a lot of wood chips. So it is very rich. It is very rich in
Which is much harder to pass.
And they didn't pee and pooped enough, you know, so it is mostly wood chips. And because it came in, it was very dry, and I hate to, and we have too much compost to turn it. And if you water compost by the top, well, you know, it goes in and it comes in, and then the center is not. So what we've built is a big enema needle to give enemas to the compost.
So you go from urine to animal.
We used a half-inch galvanized pipe. I inserted a dowel at the end, shaped it as a needle, so I rammed it in with the water. It expanded and it's very tight, so I have a needle. And then with a drill press, I drilled some holes, put a valve at the other end, and the thing is 6 foot long, and we just ram it in, turn it on for 2-3 minutes, and then move it around, all around. And what I'm going to do is get an air compressor, put a little tube that will also inject air into the water.
Keep it eroded.
So we're going to inject water and air into the compost, and it'll have to stay. And the other thing is that when you remove the needle, you create a vent through it. So you can do the same thing with a Johnson bar, but by adding water to it. When we opened the compost pile today, it was really hot. And when I say really hot, it must have been 160, 170 degrees. And it was exactly the right moisture, because it will absorb whatever water it needs, and the rest will disappear.
Do you ever have access to the horse bedding that's saturated with urine? Have a structure dig, and they periodically hit that urine layer.
Yeah.
And they set it aside in special piles because it's so loaded with nitrogen.
Yeah, the only problem that I've had with horse manure in the first garden,
Vermicide.
I got exactly. Yeah.
Vermicide.
And in this garden, we have beds where we have a lot of where initially we had a lot of manure. 3 years ago, it's broken down outside. And in the aisles, we collect leaves in the neighborhood. We pile them in the aisles, so it keeps the weeds down. And at the same time, by the time the summer, you know, sweet potatoes now are going to cover in the summer with the rain, the leaves decompose, and in the fall, we just pull them on the side. But you have earthworms in the aisles, none in the bed. And to find out who uses, you know, they all tell you, oh, no, we don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, my stable says they're all organic, but the only thing they use is neem oil emitters and bees.
Well, that's no problem, but
And they bought the egg, the parasitic fly that eats them. They swear they don't put any additives in the food. I mean, the food or anything.
then that's a good thing. We've had that problem. So now I use it hesitantly. Anyway, so we have this. Do we have any more leaves? Because we could put, you know, this can go in.
Yeah, I think it's not an awful lot of it.
No, but
You wouldn't want to put that in first to perforate your.
yeah.
Not saying too
Anything sort
Is it planted in the top layer or?
Hugelculture.
Yeah, hair.
I think it's HU.
Brittany.
Compost.
Compost or
Let's do it. There you go.
here's more leaves.
We've got a bag of leaves right here.
There we go.
Compost would be good too.
Yeah, we'll put that on the very top.
What, this on the top?
Yeah.
Compost.
Well,
I see what you're saying.
oh.
Yeah, it's probably like a mop, yeah.
Now, one thing, yeah, that may be a little, you should have put, you know what, let's put this material underneath.
Smarter than the other shot. Just trying to get rid
We need to get the hose and
Wet it.
one thing that I found is very important is to wet the material.
kind of get it going from both sides.
That's
Yeah.
right.
As you say, you get the water on top too.
And to seed it with compost tea, just regular dirt, so that they can get started. And it's amazing to see how much water the material, you see? This here is dry as a plant.
Right. Move it a little bit.
So it's important to do it, to wet it as you go. In one garden we watered it as we built it. In the other one it was going so fast, we had 110 volunteers. We just couldn't keep up and we didn't have the water. So now we've had to inject a lot of water in it and it is not breaking down anywhere as fast. What?
Water it while you do it?
Yeah.
We got tons of people. Use your social capital, right?
There you go. Show them how it's done there.
Because you did it last time.
Didn't I? Yeah. I had fun too.
You're an amazing water boy.
I know. Yeah, you got me saying that, right? That was so funny.
That was hilarious.
Wasn't that funny? That was so funny.
I watched the video and I was laughing.
I know. He said first thing he said permaculture laws. I was like, permaculture laws. He's like, really fan. I was like, permaculture laws. I thought he was calling me a permaculture. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, that's what I heard.
I had a bad suggestion, but this is permaculture, right? We should have all the guys get in a circle and help get more nitrogen in there.
Nitrogen! A nitrogen fix!
You know what?
Who's got to go? I'll turn my back.
Turn around.
I'll turn my back.
Something.
Yeah, and wait your
And
turn.
any squatters, you know, if there's any female squatters.
In Japan, every new public building
Men front to front,
Has to
ladies
be-
back to back.
equipped with public bathrooms that separate urine from feces.
Yes.
And they have special toilets that do that. And they have tanker trucks that come and collect it. Yeah. So it is recycling beer.
Yes, beer.
At one of my gardens, we have a neighbor who likes beer. He's a big guy, and he collects all his urine, and we have the best compost that you can think of, because he comes in and pours it on. And we collect seaweed,
Not in the prepubescent.
leaves, and also city mulch. It is, we have a terrific.
What about your fish emulsion?
What? And fish emulsion. And no, we don't. Not fish emulsion. Whole fish
Whole
carcasses.
fish carcass,
Yes.
yeah. And that's good too, right? So now you compost everything.
So yeah, on top of it, what I do is put some compost, and actually the top, when I started digging, was pretty good. So we're gonna put that in, and this is bugs on nitrogen.
Does the dirt go back on top? Does the sand go back on top?
The what?
Does the sand go back on top of the final?
I'm not going to use the sandy part. I'm going to use the.
I saw some topsoil in the front when you grabbed it too bad. Okay.
Whoa.
Oh, look at all those bugs.
Oh, that's beautiful. Bugs. That's a good sign. That's some live soil. Look at all that life coming out of there.
That's your nitrogen.
All of the rest of the junk, all the ornamentals and stuff.
Does someone want to keep watering this? I'll go grab
We're
some
using
bags.
7th generation
Can I get a volunteer?
soaps. Right. Well, even a little bit of bleach. By the time it gets through the primary and the secondary and the septic diluted, it's diluted so much that it gets lighter. We do need diesel vinegar. My wife does
Medicine.
it's a moving but it is amazing.
The only one on the planet that's favorable.
Well, your secondary and is ideally is supposed to be
now I'm doing a reset button.
aerobic side. There's two sides.
So we're pushing the
Then
reset
the
button.
primary side is and that's anaerobic. But then after it percolates up through that J2, then the second one is aerobic on that side. And you can add